Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Bremer, and alongside me is Logan Camden, and you already know the drill. It's Sunday night, so we're going to be reacting to all of today's NFL games, that being Week 13. And Logan, we're going to start with the primetime game because this involved my Buffalo Bills. I was very excited for this game, but as great as the Bills looked and as dominant as they were, I feel like the main storyline from this game is just the disaster that it was for the San Francisco 49ers. Christian McCaffrey leaves this game with what we're told is a knee injury. They just get absolutely destroyed. I mean, it's 35-10 when Mitch Trubisky comes into the game, and now they're sitting at 5-7. And I think we can officially say the season is over. We were talking about how that was basically the case last week. Now, I don't think that there's any light whatsoever at the end of the tunnel. So how catastrophic a spot do you think the Niners are in? How concerned are you about the future of this franchise?
I mean, I think the big question is their Super Bowl window closed? And I mean, it's certainly not getting any more open, right? The big concern is Christian McCaffrey, considering this was a non-contact injury. I don't want to assume the worst, and obviously we don't have any update on the situation, but I mean, my guess would be he probably doesn't play the rest of the year. I mean, what's the point? Like, there's nothing really to play for considering their standings in their own division as well as the conference. Like, I think it's probably just time to put this season to bed. And that's a sad reality again for a team that this year had Super Bowl expectations. I think it hinges on McCaffrey's injury. I think it hinges on, if Trent Williams comes back next season and if he's, fully committed and ready to go. I think it hinges on the availability of the other stars too, right? Debo, Kittle, and Ayuk. In my crystal ball, Carson, you tell me how you feel. I think next year's boom or bust for San Francisco. I think it's probably the last year where they really have a shot, unless McCaffrey is done. If this is a serious, career-changing injury, I think the Niners' window is closed without McCaffrey. I think they need a guy of that caliber to be healthy, to be available. But what gets complicated after next year is obviously they have to pay Brock Purdy, and that's why I say that next year is the most important season for them. And it's going to be the last year, I think, of their real Super Bowl window. It's just a shame that this has been the theme for a lot of years with the Niners. Obviously, they weren't as banged up as they have been in years previous. They let a couple of games slip right through their fingers early on in the season, some important in-division games, and that's what sinks them. But I would lean on the window is closing, and next year, is probably their last year where they're really going to be able to take advantage of it.
Yeah, and I think that they've pretty clearly just been passed by some of the other teams in the NFC, right? The Lions are way better now and are also incredibly set up to maintain this success for years to come. There are teams that are clearly trending upwards much more, like the Packers. The Vikings are going to have a situation on their hands with Sam Darnold and how much they pay him, but I just think they have a more complete, better structured roster in place right now. So I think injuries are a huge part of the downfall for the Niners this year. And I think particularly at this point in the season, the last couple weeks, right? I mean, the defense that's out there particularly is just nothing close to the Niners' full strength defense. It's kind of a joke. You don't have Javon Hargrave, of course, who went down early in the year. They haven't had Dre Greenlaw all year, but now you haven't had Bosa out there for a couple weeks. You haven't had Hufanga out there. You don't have Lenore out there. So that's brutal, right? I mean, you're basically going up against the second string defense with a banged up Fred Warner, the only really high level starter who's out there on the field. And I don't know that the Niners defense would have been great. I don't think that it was ever really great this year, but I do think that it was a solid unit that had talent to play up to a higher level if they had been healthy and if they had been better coached. So I think that that's where you're optimistic about a turnaround going forward. And I also think that there's still a lot of offensive talent here. Kyle Shanahan is a great offensive coach. And so I think that, yeah, if they can get into next year healthy, then they could put forth a really good offense. But clearly, this is a very flawed team. Injuries were a big part of the downfall. Also, just some brutal blown games. You think about what they did 3 times within their division, just sort of inexplicably blowing these games through special team gaffes and some freak plays. A lot of that is a big part of the story of this season and why they're as bad as they are, 5-7, but also never for a second did they look like last year's team, which was a juggernaut. And that's really the concern going forward. And I'm with you. The CMC injury, That's going to be big because if he's not the same player, we saw the Niners just were not the same offense without him early this year. They can still be a good offense, but they're not going to be the same. And really, I think the pivot point for this franchise is going to be whether or not they pay Brock Purdy, because I just don't think you can do it, man. That is just not a quarterback that you can pay 50, 60 million dollars. We talked about it, dude. I mean, I'd give him 30. I think he is the definition of a guy who has to exist in that mid-market for quarterbacks. And if he is demanding more than that, just go and draft at the position again. I think that we have seen what Shanahan can do with below average quarterback talent. We saw how Jimmy G looked and how he was able to produce in the Niners offense. That is just not a good quarterback. Brock Purdy, I've said for a long time, I think is better than Jimmy G. I also think his production, his numbers, his efficiency has all been inflated by playing in a Shanahan offense with the skill position talent around him. Just look at how they treat him in this game. In a game like this against a great team, when you're going to have to try to outgun an elite quarterback, an elite offense, and you're facing a good defense and you're in the snow, conditions aren't ideal, and you're a little shorthanded, and you get to a 3rd and 14, you're in field goal range, you hand the ball off, right? You don't even put the ball in Brock Purdy's hands. And once they're down 14-3 in this game, you know it's over. You know there is zero chance that Brock Purdy is going to elevate to the level to lead the Niners back and win this football game. And things just got worse from there. Things just spiraled. He couldn't really move effectively in these conditions. He lost the ball outright on that fumble untouched, which is the same exact thing that happened to him in a rainy playoff game last year. He's just not an elevator. He's not an elevator. He is a guy who can execute within the system. He is not an elevator. He is not a franchise quarterback worth paying top dollar. And if you do want to salvage this thing, then that is going to rest on cutting ties with Brock Purdy if he is demanding that kind of money. Because I believe in Shanahan, dude. I know there's Shanahan critics. I understand some of the very specific situational stuff you can have your gripes with. But overall, this dude is consistently elevating offenses, turning out elite offenses without anything close to elite quarterback play. That is such a rarity in today's NFL. That is a dude who I think can bridge you to another era. I mean, we saw it already with the transition from Jimmy G to Purdy. I think Shanahan is that staple for this franchise. And I think a lot of Niners fans do not appreciate the fact that that is the case. But if you tie too much cap to Brock Purdy, I mean, with the limitations we have seen around him in this roster and with the major injury concerns we have about some of these other key players, then it's over. Then the window is shut. I think already clearly this team has regressed a bunch. And I don't know if I would view them as a contender going into next year. But I definitely think if they're healthy, they're a much better football team than the team that we saw tonight. And then the team that we've seen overall this season. But you can't pay Purdy, man. I think that just dooms your future.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, if they're fully healthy, I think this team is a contender. I disagree with that. Like, if they're at full strength, if McCaffrey's there, if Trent is there, if Dre is there, if Hargrave,
how many teams in the NFC would you like more than them?
Fully healthy.
Yeah.
2, Philly and Detroit. But I mean, I'm not even ready. I'm not even confident and ready to say that because we don't know how different those teams are going to look next season. And I'm not guessing that any of this is going to happen, but Detroit, if Ben Johnson chooses to depart, which I don't think he will, say Chicago comes knocking on their door, says, hey, we've got Caleb Williams. You come figure out the offense. You can lead our ship and be our franchise savior. Well, then I'm ready to knock down Detroit a peg if they don't have Ben Johnson, right? If Philly loses Kellen Moore and or Vic Fangio, that makes a difference to me. So a lot can change in one offseason is all I'm saying. And there is a level of stability that I get with San Francisco that I don't with other teams because of a Kyle Shanahan. So look, if they're fully healthy, and again, I mean everybody across the board, every position group back to full health, I wholeheartedly view the 49ers as a real deal contender. But I completely agree with your point here. You can't overpay Brock Purdy. And that's not just exclusive to the San Francisco 49ers. That is any prospective franchise on the market if it's not San Francisco. I wouldn't feel comfortable paying Brock Purdy a dime more than $30 million a year. And that just seems like that's what the number is right now, right? Baker Mayfield, that's what he got. Sam Darnold, maybe Darnold and his team could convince me into biting on 35 mil, but that's the absolute apex for a guy like Darnold because I do like Darnold a little bit more than a guy like Brock Purdy, but it's close. You just can't allocate that amount of your cap. You're sinking your franchise. And we've seen that happen. If you pay the wrong quarterback,
Yeah.
you're screwed. I mean, look at what happened to the New York Football Giants, right? Look at what is currently transpiring with the Dallas Cowboys. And obviously that's not all on Dak Prescott, but it goes for any quarterback. You just can't overpay a guy at that position. And the comfortable mark for me for Brock would be 20 to 25, but I just think he's going to demand more than that. So I'm
Yeah.
for paying Brock, but anything north of 30 mil, and I think you're making a grave mistake. But I'm not ready to slam the door shut on San Francisco. That being said, it's not going to be easy. Like you said, Green Bay is still one of the youngest teams in football. They are still ascending. They have a much better quarterback. Philadelphia is more talented right now, top to bottom. Detroit is more talented right now, top to bottom. And more importantly, outside of the top dogs in there, in Minnesota included in that too. Minnesota, I just think is more talented right now. More important than that, their division is going to be better next year. I don't know about LA, right? The Rams, I think, hinge on the status of their offensive line and what Matt Stafford looks like next year, but Arizona's not going anywhere. Seattle's not going anywhere, right? Those teams are going to be uber competitive. It's not going to get any easier, but I'm not ready to sell the farm quite yet on San Francisco.
No. And I think that when we're talking about where they rank within the NFC, I think that Detroit and Philly would clearly be above them, even if they're fully healthy. Then I think they'd be in that group with Green Bay and Minnesota. I think we really need to see a turnaround from this defense, which they have the talent to do. But we also saw them slip in the second half of last year when they were more average defensively, and they were average again when they were mostly healthy defensively this year. So I think that they're in that second tier. They're in that second tier of NFC teams. I would so confidently pick them to win the division next year if they're healthy. Like, I like the NFC West, but I still think if they have all their dudes out there, they should be a cut above. We should see improvement from this team on both sides of the ball. But this is just a really, really brutal season for them when you consider what the expectations were coming into the year. It's kind of a disaster, but I don't know. Maybe the silver lining is you put Brock Purdy in a difficult situation, and you saw what he looked like in that situation. And it's not a dude who is a franchise savior, right? And this is the context that we always apply when people want to put Tua Tagovailoa in those conversations, when they want to put Brock Purdy in those conversations. That's awesome that with these offensive geniuses and these crazy weapons in place, they can produce with elite efficiency in the regular season. Put them in a December game, put them in a January game against an elite defense when it's cold and you go down early and you need them to win you that football game and you're down a weapon or two, right? The Buffalo Bills are down 2 of their 4 best receiving weapons in this game. You don't hear a peep about it. Doesn't matter. The machine just keeps on humming. Put them in those circumstances and see if they hold up to the test. And they don't. A Tua Tagovailoa doesn't. A Brock Purdy doesn't. So if there's a silver lining, it's that you didn't get fooled for any longer. And hopefully that realization remains the case. Even if you come back next year and you are fully healthy and the offense is firing, you have to understand it's not because of Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy is a cog in the machine. And like Jimmy Garoppolo, even though he's better, he can be replaced. And the irreplaceable elements are the weapons, and they are Kyle Shanahan, and they are a Trent Williams on the offensive line. So I don't think that it's sky is falling mode for the Niners long-term in the sense that, like, they can't salvage this. But I do think this is a horrible, horrible season for them. And I think that tonight was a very appropriately ugly end to what has been a horrible season for them. And I think you have to be much lower on them, not just this year, but even going forward, than where you would have been coming into this year, where it's like, yeah, on paper, absolutely, they should be the NFC favorite.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. You got to feel for San Francisco. The only other
Definitely.
area outside of injuries that I would say is I do think a part of the defensive step back was the change in defensive coordinator, right? It's another year, another offseason where you lose a very important defensive coordinator, and this has happened year after year for San Francisco. And they're hard to replace, but like I said, I'm not fully out on them. One point that you made about Brock, though, I think is really important about Josh Allen and why I think he's the MVP of the league this season. And you're talking about the conditions and the circumstances that the Bills are in. I think Josh Allen may be the most impervious quarterback to negative circumstances and negative situations in games. Like, there's no quarterback. I mean this in the league. There's no quarterback I would want more in a shitty, nasty weather game than Josh Allen. And I think you see it all throughout tonight where the Niners don't trust Brock. They don't want him putting the ball in the air whatsoever. And Josh is standing back there ripping balls out of shotgun, just firing across the field to Dawson Knox, to Quentin Morris, to Khalil Shakir, right? Whoever it is. I think Josh is the most impervious quarterback to any of that in the NFL, more than Lamar, more than Mahomes, more than anybody else. It doesn't matter. And that's why I think Josh's game scales so well to the playoffs, is because in an environment like this, right? That's why it's so hard. That's why Chicago's never had a 4,000-yard passer. It's hard finding a quarterback that can succeed in cold weather consistently, right? That's why going to a cold weather team like Cleveland or Chicago or Pittsburgh or any of these gritty, nasty cities, you got to have a guy that can withstand those circumstances. And Josh, to me, is the guy more than anybody else in the league that can ball out in circumstances like this. And his game takes no hit whatsoever, right? He's still effective as a rusher. And that's the one leg that I would give him above anybody else, is that he can just dominate in the ground in these matchups the way nobody else can. And he's still going to put mustard on his balls. He's still going to be uber accurate. He's so unaffectable, Carson, in any situation. He just seems so cool, calm, and collected. And he just seems unstoppable. Like, again, down key receivers in nasty weather. And this is no dig at Russ. Look at what happened to Russ against Cleveland. Russ is playing awesome football. I'm so impressed with Russell Wilson and what he did today, what he's been doing all season. Like, he was affected by the snow. He was significantly hampered by the snow in that Cleveland game. And in similar conditions, it just doesn't matter. Like, Josh just seems so unstoppable. And that, on top of how consistent he's been this year, that on top of that Buffalo hasn't dropped a game that, outside of the Baltimore game, Buffalo hasn't faltered whatsoever this season. That's why I think he's MVP of the league. And that's why I think that Josh is the guy that I want, along with Patrick Mahomes, more than anybody else when it comes playoff time. Josh just seems impervious to everything, man. Again, man, we always glaze Josh when we talk about it, but it's so deserved. Like, that's why he's a top 5 quarterback ever to me. That's why I want Josh, along with Pat, as the quarterbacks that I want going into a playoff run. He's Superman, man. He just seems unstoppable. And this game just further reinforces that, man. Nothing can stop Josh.
He's also whimsical, and you can't underestimate the power of whimsy. When Amari Cooper pitches him back the ball, and he's just ready for it, and he scores a touchdown, and I thought in that moment, this is just backyard football. These are just guys being dudes having fun, and they're going to go make some snow angels and drink hot cocoa and giggle and kick their legs until morning after this. That's the leadership quality, and that's the whimsy of a Josh Allen, and it's incredibly valuable. But I agree with you. I think that Josh is the MVP. I've been saying that. I thought that the Chiefs game really made him the front runner. And I just think, again, you have to look at what he is doing in circumstances where so many people were low on this Bills team before the year, where the weapons have been really banged up in recent weeks. And Buffalo is now the number 2 scoring offense in football. They have surpassed Baltimore. Josh has 27 total touchdowns to 7 turnovers on the year. We've talked about it time and again. He has never been better at limiting negative plays, at taking care of the football, and he is churning out elite team offense without high-level skill position talent alongside him, as I would have predicted that he would do coming into the year. But when you consider how people were talking about the Bills and where they're sitting now, scoring 30 points per game with a 10-2 record, having beaten the Chiefs, having won 7 straight games, that to me is the MVP of the league.
Also, yeah, not to cut you off, I just wanted to add, not only were people low on Buffalo, the league voted Josh Allen the most overrated player in the players did coming into this season. We didn't forget. We have receipts.
It's ridiculous, dude. It's absolutely absurd. And I think that he just continues to prove that and cement that. And I think that you see that in some big games this season. You see that against the Chiefs. Coming into this, I think you would have viewed this as a big game, right? It ended up being a complete steamrolling. And of course, the Niners were injured, absolutely. But the Bills are playing at an incredibly high level. And I don't even want to act like this is a Josh Carey job. I just think Josh is continuing to play at an elite, incredibly efficient, mistake-averse level. but he only has to throw the ball 17 times in this game. I think you have to give credit to James Cook, who was phenomenal on the ground. Ray Davis racks up some yards towards the end of this game, but a really good second running back in that room. The offensive line, I thought, was opening up some big old holes. Yes, against a really shorthanded Niners defense, but that's an important component to get going in the snow. And I just think that this is the most complete Bills team that we've seen. And I think this is the best team in the AFC, Logan. I am willing to say that if it came down to it in a playoff game today, Bills against the Chiefs, I would pick the Buffalo Bills. I think the offense is significantly better. Again, this is how they look still these past couple weeks without two of their four best receivers in the room. I think it's the most balanced attack that we've seen from them. I think it's the best play calling we've seen from them. I do think at full strength, it is a really good receiving room with really complementary skill sets. And it is the Josh Allen who I trust the most to play perfect situational football. So I just look at this team and I don't see a hole. I guess you could say like the run defense isn't great. We've talked about that. The run defense has been problematic in a couple matchups, but Kansas City's secondary is equally concerning, if not more concerning. And Kansas City's offensive line, I think, is a concern with how they've been playing as of late, where Buffalo's offensive line has been good. I think has overachieved expectations on the year. And Josh Allen is just playing better football than Patrick Mahomes. If you want to tell me, hey, when it comes down to it in January, there is not a soul on the planet I want more than Patrick Mahomes, I can't argue with that. Okay. He has been perfect in those situations. But as we said time and again, outside of Mahomes, nobody has been better in those situations in this era than Josh Allen. And he is just playing at a higher level than Patrick Mahomes right now. He is more locked in. He is making fewer mistakes. He is elevating the supporting cast around him. He is obviously more of a dual threat. So I think that the Bills are playing at an extremely high level and they're just dominating teams, man. Like they go out there and they crush teams. And I am not somebody who's going to ring the alarm bells because the Chiefs continue to limp their way to these unimpressive one-score wins, because I just think that that's foolish when they are the most proven winners that we've seen since the Patriots at the peak of their powers. And when last year, what was everybody doing? Ringing the alarm bells because of an unimpressive regular season. And then they did what they did in the playoffs. So I am far from writing off the Kansas City Chiefs, but also like, it's not something that I can completely disregard. And I do think the defense has taken a little bit of a step back from last year. And the offensive line has taken a little bit of a step back from last year. And the Bills defense has now rounded into a form that has really impressed me and has moved me from where they were at earlier in the season. And they're healthier defensively now. Matt Milano makes his return for this game. So those teams to me are still very close. And I think they continue to separate from everybody else in the AFC. I've been saying for a while, I think that both these teams are better than Baltimore, but that gap just continues to grow as Baltimore loses again today. But I just think the Bills have more pop. I think they're more dynamic, and that defense is playing so well right now that I would take them. I would take them out of the AFC.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a bad take. And on the run defense point, I mean, I think a lot of that is situational play calling wise. I don't think it's a talent issue. I think it's more of just the Bills trying to always have two safeties up top, which is going to leave them susceptible to getting ran on. But I don't think it's a personnel issue. Like, I think this is one of the better run defenses you guys have had in the Allen era. I think this is the best pass rush you guys have had. And I really like this secondary. I really like Taylor Rapp. I like Taron Johnson, right? I like Rasul Douglas. So I don't blame you for that. And I'm not a sky is falling Chiefs guy either, but the Chiefs have a glaring red flag that the Bills don't. They have two turnstiles at tackle. That's a problem. The Bills, to me, don't have a glaring weakness. Like, again, if you would point to something, it's the run defense, but they've been down a linebacker this entire year, an all-pro linebacker, mind you,
yeah.
right? So, and the Chiefs have had that issue all season long. If it's penalties, but more importantly, if it's just letting guys fly by them to get to Mahomes. And that's been worse over the past couple of weeks. Like, I think that's been exploited more than ever, over the past few weeks for the Chiefs. So I don't know who I'd pick right now. I'm going to be honest. I hate sitting on the fence here. I don't know. I think it is a true toss-up. And clown on me if you want. I still consider Baltimore to be very, very deadly. Baltimore still scares me. I don't care how many freaking regular season games the Ravens lose. Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson strike fear into me. They are, but Buffalo and Kansas City have separated from them, and I still think they're all deadly. I don't know who I'd pick right now, but I don't blame you for taking Buffalo. I think Buffalo's playing as good a football as anybody else in the sport right now. And those two other teams, I would say, are Detroit and Philadelphia. I think
Yeah.
those are the teams playing the best ball right now.
Completely agreed. The one advantage that I think Kansas City does clearly have, right? Because I think if you look at overall defense, these teams are much closer than I expected coming into the year. And I do like Buffalo's offense more. It's the coaching. I still just trust Andy Reid so much more in a playoff game than I do Sean McDermott. And we've seen Sean McDermott coach up really good regular season defenses before. And then in playoff settings, get too conservative against elite quarterbacks, get outcoached situationally, bungle some clock management stuff. I think he's terrible with challenges. Like, he is still a red flag for me with this team, but the Bills are just playing much better football, and there's nothing they're doing right now, and maybe outside of that concern about McDermott, that doesn't translate at a really high level to the playoffs. I think they're just playing their best football, and I think that they continue to prove it against really solid competition. And they're going to go Rams next week, and they're going to go Lions next week after that. So the Rams aren't a great football team, but you got to go out there and beat Matt Stafford. And then obviously the Lions have been the best team in football this year. So those are a couple more good tests, but I think that there were some people a few weeks ago who were saying, oh, well, the Bills haven't beaten anybody. Silly, man. Silly. A lot of people thought they were pretenders, and I think that they are the best team in the AFC right now to me. But Logan, you mentioned the Ravens, and that was the game of the day on paper coming into this week. Ravens-Eagles, super exciting with how great Philly has been as of late, and they end up racking up another win in this one. What was your biggest takeaway from Ravens-Eagles?
Justin Tucker is a massive liability.
Oh, my God.
I mean, I don't like starting with special teams or kickers, but you think about the games that the Ravens have lost this year. 3 of them could have been directly swung or impacted by Justin Tucker, right? The Steelers game, this game. He leaves 7 points on the board, right? And just considering how Baltimore moved the ball at the end, right? Like, if that was a game-winning drive, they could have stole it. And I don't want to, like, completely bail out Lamar, but that was a strength of Baltimore's this entire time. Anytime they crossed midfield, it was an automatic 3 points for Baltimore. The way that people talk about Brandon Aubrey now with Dallas, that's what Justin Tucker was. Anytime they got across midfield, it was guaranteed points. And Tuck leaves 7 points on the board in this one. Missed extra point. A missed 47-yard field goal. And I'll give him a little slack on that because Lamar took a sack on the play previous to that would have made it a chip shot that I almost guarantee Tuck makes. But 47 yards, dude, it's 2024. It's not 2000 anymore, man. You can't be missing 47-yard field goals. Anything 50 yards and in, you got to make. He misses a 55-yarder in this one. On the year now, he's 19 of 27 on field goals and 42 of 44 on extra points. He's got a field goal percentage of 70.4%. Like, we are creeping into Billy Cundiff
territory.
And that's a funny one. Yeah, man. Josh Scobie territory, or Jeff Reed, like guys who are playing themselves out of town. Like, I'll put it this way. If Justin Tucker's name was not Justin Tucker, he would be cut tomorrow. Yeah. The Baltimore Ravens would be having open tryouts with kickers, trying to figure out who the hell is their next guy. Carson, what does the NFL stand for? Not for long, man. And I'll tell you what, if I was Harbaugh, I don't care what Tucker's status is in this city. You have given me a sample size large enough this season. I don't trust you, which means I would be getting guys in there, even if it's just to light a fire under Tuck's ass. I'm getting kickers in there this week, and I'm trying guys out because I either want to light that fire under him, or next week he misses a field goal, he's done. I don't care. I don't care about the name value. What are you doing for me right now? Like, I get it, man. Kickers go through slumps. This to me is not a slump. This is an extended stretch that shows me who you are, because his confidence is shot. You see it every time he goes up there to kick a football. In an individual sport, and obviously football is not an individual sport, in golf, in disc golf, which I very much enjoy, right? obviously not on the stature of some other sports, tennis,
No, there we go. Yeah.
MMA, right? UFC, any sport where you are solely responsible for the outcome, confidence is everything. It is the
Mhm.
most important thing that you can have. And Tux is gone. And I don't want that guy kicking balls for me. So it's strange we start and again on the Lamar thing that I was talking about earlier, I don't want to completely bail out Lamar. Lamar is still dealing with guys dropping wide open passes, man, every single game. Tuck is still not putting points on the board. I don't think this is all on Lamar, and I think it's probably going to get overstated how much the Ravens' struggles have been on Lamar. I think some of the red zone stuff is on Lamar, but like his team isn't pulling their weight. And I think a big part of it is Justin Tucker right now. I don't know, Carson. Are you at wit's end with Tuck right now? What is your, if you were responsible for the Ravens, what would your game plan be moving forward?
I definitely think this is his last year. I don't think there's any chance that they cut him. And I don't disagree with what you said about if his name wasn't Justin Tucker, then he would be gone. Because the reality is this year has been really bad, but last year also wasn't good, right? He was 86% on field goals last year, but he was 1 of 5 from 50 plus. So we now have a 2-year sample of him really struggling on the kicks that make the difference. Because as you say, everything inside of 50 is basically just expected to be good in today's NFL. To me, he is just another red flag, another major concern to add to the list for the Baltimore Ravens, who I haven't been as high on as you have been. And I have a lot of concerns about them, man. Tucker is one of them. We absolutely have to worry about Justin Tucker making a big kick, right? I mean, he's arguably a bigger concern than Tyler Bass, Logan.
Which is
Tyler Bass.
crazy. Dude,
Tyler
honestly,
Ass.
when he made that 61-yard field goal, I think Tyler Bass got his juju right. I don't know if that flipped
Well,
us.
he missed another kick today. I mean, it's in the snow, so I'll give him kind of a pass for that. But then he also missed an extra point against the Chiefs. I
Okay.
don't know, man.
I don't know.
I still have concerns about Tyler Bass.
I guess he's always going to make me a little bit nervous, but both of them don't instill confidence in me when they're going up there to kick, right? When you're in Tyler Bass
Yeah.
conversations, there's a problem.
It's just not a concern you want to have as a contender. There's not a more infuriating way to have your season ended than on the legs of a bad kicker who has shown you for a year, 2 years that they are bad, and you did nothing to upgrade at the position. And I just don't think there's any argument that Justin Tucker is an above average NFL kicker right now. So that's a concern. We know the secondary sucks. We know the defense is not good overall, right? I mean, they're like the number 25 scoring defense. That's been consistent over the entire year. So that's a major concern. This offense is amazing, but it has now struggled in 2 of the last 3 weeks. And I know that they moved the ball in this game and Tucker does leave 7 points on the board, but like they had 12 points before the final minute of this game. They had 12 points before garbage time, and they were not good situationally. As you mentioned, not good in the red zone, not good on third down. And that's now 2 of the last 3 weeks when they have faced elite defenses. Philly, an elite defense. Pittsburgh, an elite defense. That this offense has looked very pedestrian. And I don't want to overstate this, but I do still think compared to some of these elite offenses, I do worry a little bit about their ability to win in multiple different ways, right? I still think that much more so than a Kansas City or a Buffalo. And I think they're clearly a better offense than Kansas City, right? But Kansas City just has the factor of, I still have this immense faith in Patrick Mahomes as a passer. And I do still worry just a little bit with Baltimore about if they get off their ideal game script, if they aren't consistently running the football against a really good defense, how does that game go for them? We've seen Lamar be the best he ever has been as a passer, and we've seen him lead some comeback wins through the air. We saw it against Cincinnati. We saw it against the Chargers. But that's just a little lingering thought in the back of my mind when we have seen them not play up to expectations twice in the last 3 weeks. So it feels very right for me to consider Baltimore a dangerous 8-5 team, right? Where I still would view them as the third biggest threat in the AFC, but there's a substantial gap between them and the teams who have just consistently gone out there and executed and won football games. The Chiefs and the Bills, who have 3 combined losses. The Ravens are immensely talented. They are very dangerous because of the ridiculous offensive punch that they can throw. But there's a reason they have all these losses. And there's a reason they have a couple of losses to bad football teams like the Browns, like the Raiders. It's because they have some of these I would argue fatal flaws. So that's the thing. That's why I'm worried about their ability to string together an actual playoff run. And Logan, they now have to prepare for the reality where they are on the road for their entire postseason. And they have to prepare for the reality where they start their playoff run at Pittsburgh. And as you have highlighted many times over, that is the most problematic matchup in terms of facing a defense for Lamar Jackson. And it doesn't get easier from there, because then it would be Buffalo and Kansas City, who I both think are just better teams who you would be facing on the road. So they've carved out a really tough path for themselves. And that's why, even though, yes, they are absolutely dangerous, I don't see them making real playoff noise. I just think it requires too many things going right and them avoiding too many of these fatal flaws that we've seen time and again throughout this regular season. There's a reason they've lost 5 games. They're a very flawed football team. Very scary, but do I think they can put it together consistently for 4 straight weeks on the road? I don't.
I don't blame you for feeling that way. And I think Philadelphia, this game directly showed you a lot of the things that are exploitable about Baltimore. And I want to be clear about something. I don't think all of these things can get exploited by one team in the AFC the way Philadelphia can. But Philadelphia is so talented that they just put a spotlight on all of them. The first thing is the offensive line. Philadelphia lived in the backfield today. And again, I know that because it's Baltimore, they're going to get theirs, right? They're going to get some. It's not a complete domination, but Lamar is under duress. And Derrick Henry wasn't as effective as Saquon Barkley was today. He got outplayed, right? You would figure that would be a box that you would have to check if you were going to win this football game. So the offensive line has legitimately regressed. They lost a lot of talent up front there, and I was optimistic that as the year went along, the offensive line would gel together and figure it out. They haven't. And against great defensive lines, Buffalo, Kansas City, they're probably going to get beaten up front. I trust those defensive lines to win against Baltimore's offensive line. On the back end, the biggest issue is still the secondary. And you see it. A.J. Brown is the best man coverage wide receiver in the NFL. And the Ravens don't have anybody that can match up with them. That is still a major, major problem. And as you mentioned with the scoring defense, the Baltimore Ravens lost a great defensive coordinator in Mike McDonald. And this year has proven to me, I think, more than anything else, coordinators are fucking important, Carson.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we always talk about personnel changes, and we harp on them all offseason. Moving forward, when I am doing season previews, I think that's the first area I'm going to look at. Who is the coordinator? What is his track record? Who is he working with? And can they figure it out as the year goes along, right? Philadelphia with Vic Fangio, uber talented, have gelled as the season has gone along, and they've figured it out. They've stuck it out. In Philadelphia, I feel like exploited all of those flaws today. The offensive line, the secondary, the continuity of the defense, the kicking. Like you said, man, I think Baltimore's still dangerous. And as a Steelers fan, Steelers fans can get upset about this. I think in a hypothetical matchup against Pittsburgh, I still think I would take Baltimore to beat us. Even though we have beaten them 9 of the last 10 times, even though we play Lamar better than anybody else, freak things have to occur for us to beat Baltimore, and I admit that. And I just don't know if that I think Baltimore would have to catastrophically melt down along with us playing a great football game. You can say what you want. That's what happened in this game, right? Baltimore had to have everything go the other way, but I don't fault you. And week after week, I'm continuing to sour on Baltimore. They were my preseason Super Bowl pick to get there. Detroit was my preseason winner, but Baltimore hasn't pulled their weight. And when we're looking at power rankings, we're going to do those later in the week. But they're behind Philly. They're way behind Buffalo. They're behind Detroit. They're way behind Kansas City. Like, Baltimore is slowly creeping into, are they below Green Bay? Are they below Minnesota? I don't know. They might be. Like, those teams are more complete to me.
They've been below Minnesota for me.
Yeah, it's the Lamar and Derrick Henry show in Baltimore, and they can only cover up so many of your holes. And most importantly, when your offensive line is this bad, and they're not bad, they're like average, right? Baltimore's got an average offensive line. That's the most important component of any offense. And so Lamar and Derrick Henry can be as great as they want. The offensive line is still a massive problem. I'm disappointed, Carson. I keep waiting for Baltimore to turn the corner and to figure it out. And I just don't think they're going to. And so I tend to agree with you. I think that Baltimore, the most likely outcome for them in the AFC is a second-round exit or a first-round exit. It's not a conference title game. It's not a Super Bowl. Those are the most likely outcomes for Baltimore.
I agree. And that line was my biggest concern about Baltimore's offense coming into the year. It was my biggest concern about them early in the year, right? I thought that we really saw Lamar under crazy duress in that Chiefs game in week 1. And then I thought they started to play better as the year went along. But I agree. I thought that they got completely outplayed. And I think that we have seen them overwhelmed against some of those elite defenses. And that's a problem. And that's where I've consistently said throughout the year, I prefer Detroit's offense when we're talking about these elite groups. You see it with Philly's offense. They just need less to go right because they are so dominant in the trenches. They just simplify the offensive formula because of how they can dictate the line of scrimmage and because of the talent that they have on the perimeter, because of the receiving talent that those teams have as well. It's easier for them. It's more reliable week after week. And that's where I do want to give Philly props in this game. I also think when we're talking about Baltimore's offensive struggles, we have to give credit to a Philly defense that has been elite, that has completely flipped a switch since the bye week, which is now 2/3 of the season for them. They're allowing 15 points per game. You gave credit to the front. I also thought the secondary was really, really excellent in this game and has been excellent since the bye. But offensively, even though they don't pop, even though they don't put up a ton of yardage in this game, their offensive formula is just so resilient. And they are the rare team that gets harder and harder to stop as the game goes along because they just grind you down physically at the point of attack. And you see that in sort of the game clinching drive at 14-12 in this game where nothing was really doing. And Baltimore, for as terrible as their secondary has been all year, they've been an awesome run defense and they were holding up well for a majority of this game against Philly's run game. But then they finally get to a point where in that second half, they just get worn down. Philly rips off 3 big runs in a row. All of a sudden, Saquon is just doing his thing and he's running all over them. And that is the superpower of Saquon Barkley. That is the superpower of this offensive line. That is the superpower of this offense. Jalen Hurts has 118 passing yards in this game. He attempts 19 passes, but they are able to grind games out because they are so phenomenal on the ground with Saquon and that offensive line. And that's a really reliable model against the vast majority of teams. Now, when we compare Philly to a Buffalo in a Super Bowl matchup or a Kansas City, do I have concerns about Jalen Hurts and my level of faith in him rising to the level that he might need to outduel these elite quarterbacks if maybe Philly's game script isn't working, right? If they aren't as dominant on the ground. Yes, I do. That is why Philly and Detroit aren't like the clear runaway Super Bowl contenders, right? If it were just, hey, when your game plan is working to a T, when you are just playing your A+ football, who are the best teams in the NFL? There's no doubt it's Philly and Detroit. They can just absolutely bludgeon teams, but that's not how things tend to go in these playoff environments. So, I mean, that's really the only thing that I could say about them. I thought that this was another impressive win, even though it wasn't super flashy. And I think Philly and Detroit are clearly and arguably the top 2 teams in the NFC, as we've been saying for the last couple weeks now.
Yeah, I agree with that. And this is an Eagles offense that was still down Devontae Smith in this game too, right? They're not even at full strength. And so that's the beauty with Jalen Hurts. I agree with you. He concerns me when you're trailing in a game and he needs to throw you back into a football game. But they've got A.J. Brown, who I think is the second best wide receiver in football. They still don't have Devontae Smith back, right? And I think they figured something out today, Carson. Or not figured out, but something they can weaponize more. And that's using Saquon and Hurts, kind of how Lamar and Derrick Henry use each other too. I think that little read option could be really, really deadly for them. And just weaponizing Hurts' strength, right? Saquon gets all the attention. He's killing you, and boom, Hurts can hit you. But Philly's strong in the trenches, and that's going to carry them through. And that is what I think scares you more than anything else is their ability to dominate at the line and build out from there. But Philly's scary, man. And their defense is legit. Their defense is very legit. They proved it again today. Philly's super talented. I'm not ready to put them over Detroit yet, but I think they're stamped. And Philly's scary, man. Philly's really scary.
They're just great. They're just a great football team. I want to give a shout out to Liam for a very generous donation to the Nerd Sesh Foundation. He says, Lamar said his mom cussed him out about him not running. That might save the season. Also, I've at least liked the Ravens defense lately. I thought the Ravens defense was okay in this game, but I also think that they've given us a lot of cause for concern over the year as a whole. But yeah, I mean, I do think that's the reality. When it comes down to these games where you need superhero Lamar, like, he just has to be willing to leave it all out there. That's what we saw in the Chiefs game. That's how actually they were able to get so close to pulling off that win, even when he was running around for his life. How many times did he run the ball in that game? Like 15 times, right? He was just absolutely willing to use his legs to their utmost potential. Also, somebody in the chat mentioned the pass that he missed to Likely. That was a big miss. Lamar had a couple missed throws in this game. Like, I don't think that we can exculpate him. He didn't do his job. He didn't rise to that elite level that he needed to. But Philly's also awesome. You mentioned Hurts and Saquon and how they can complement each other in the run game with the read option. Who would you have higher in the MVP race between those two? Because I feel like now that Philly is humming, they're both sort of emerging as some like fringe candidates. There was talk of that on the broadcast. Who would be higher in your MVP race, Saquon or Hurts? I know who you're going to say. Well, I agree.
I mean, no offense to Jalen Hurts. I mean, he is not sniffing my MVP ballot. I could probably rattle off. Saquon makes this thing go. Saquon is what puts them over the top. My MVPs, Josh, Lamar, probably Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow's probably 3. Even though the Bengals
it's
suck,
hard.
I don't care.
Yeah.
Joe Burrow's been playing all. Joe Burrow, it played an insane game today, and Joe Burrow scares me like Mahomes, like Josh Allen. Lamar doesn't scare me. Like when we play Lamar, I know what Lamar can do. I know what he's capable of at his apex. Joe Burrow strikes fear into me. And then I'd probably go Saquon after those 3 guys at the top. And then maybe Derrick Henry after that. But I don't know, man. Do you have Hurts on your ballot? Hurts isn't anywhere close to me.
No, and I'm actually looking at the DraftKings ad and the odds right now, and the DraftKings odds would agree. Saquon's plus 250, Jalen Hurts is all the way at plus 6,000. That's right to me. I mean, Saquon is having a historically great running back season. He has almost 1,800 yards from scrimmage, and he's got 13 total touchdowns. Like, I absolutely think that he is the heart and soul of this offense. And Hurts, man, I mean, we've seen him vulture 9 touchdowns from Saquon this year, where Saquon gets them to the goal line and Jalen Hurts sneaks it in. Like, obviously, it's very effective, but also I think the touchdown numbers really inflate Jalen Hurts' actual impact.
He did have a real one today, though. He did have a real one today.
He did indeed. He also had a sneak one today. So that's the way that it goes. But yeah, I think that it's easily Saquon. And honestly, I think Saquon might be third for me right now. I mean, he's on pace, or at least he was after last week, to break numerous major running back records, like total rushing yards, like yards from scrimmage, while racking up touchdowns at this rate, while being the biggest difference maker in an elite offense, in my opinion. And although I think that Burrow is more impactful just because he's a quarterback playing at an extremely high level, when you're 4-8, you just can't be in the MVP race. I'm sorry. No matter how well you're playing individually, it just doesn't really happen. You just don't really get looks for the award. But let's talk about Joe Burrow, Logan. And let's talk about his Cincinnati Bengals, because they took on your Pittsburgh Steelers today and they lost. And they are one of 2 teams in the AFC who entered the year, in most people's eyes, with playoff expectations and have had a brutal go at it and lost again today. The other one being the New York Jets. Who do you think is in a worse spot right now between those 2 teams, Logan?
I think it's the Jets. Both of these teams are poverty franchises. The Jets and the Bengals both. They are poverty, bottom of the barrel.
Oh, my.
They suck. Their organizations are terrible. The Jets, I say, because they're so dysfunctional and they're so far away. I think their front office is incompetent, and I think Woody Johnson is an idiot. I think that the guy's clueless about what it takes to win football games, what you need to put in place, the culture that you need to establish, the steps you need to take, and just how you operate. So that's why I say I think it's worse from the top down, but this team isn't anywhere close to contention. Aaron Rodgers is washed. I would take 19 quarterbacks over Aaron Rodgers right now. And maybe you get another season from Aaron Rodgers, but to me, it's meaningless. It doesn't really matter at all if Rodgers comes back next year or not. You're not winning the Super Bowl. You're not close to winning the Super Bowl. The offensive line is atrocious. This is a talented defense, but they're poorly coached. And maybe I would feel different about New York if they had Robert Saleh.
Mm-hmm.
Robert Saleh was the best coach they had since Rex Ryan. But now that Saleh's gone, I don't care. You're irrelevant. Your coaching staff stinks. Your defense has significantly regressed without Saleh. They seem like they are, unprepared defensively coming into these games, and the offense is nowhere close. And the Bengals aren't that much better. I think the Bengals have zero foundation of their team, but they have Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, and they are the best quarterback and wide receiver duo in football. They are both having career seasons. They are leading a top 5 scoring offense in football. The defense just happens to be one of the worst in the NFL. It's Trey Hendrickson versus the world. Right now, they're the number 2 worst scoring defense in football, and they're the 3rd worst in terms of EPA per play. But they at least have Burrow and Chase. That's what sucks, man. It's just like the Bengals organization is like a house of cards, and at the bottom, it's just Burrow and Chase. And if you take either of those guys out, they're done for. This organization is one of the worst in football again. But they at least have Burrow and Chase. And so I know that the offense is going to be great. The Jets, to me, are in a worse spot, just roster-wise, talent-wise, and then front office-wise. They're a disaster. The Jets are an absolute joke, and they're a disaster.
I agree. I think it's definitely the Jets. I think that they are both in a worse spot, and I think they're the more disappointing team this season. I thought that the Bengals' flaws were more apparent to me before the year. I mean, we both picked them to miss the playoffs. I thought the Jets would be a good wild card team, and they just are not good, dude. And like every 50-50 game that they've had this year, basically, they've lost. And the result of that is a 3-9 team that I don't really see has a path to getting better. I don't see how this offense gets much better. You've put the pieces around Aaron Rodgers in terms of weapons in the receiving game, right? I mean, he has Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams. He is just thoroughly mid. He is a below average starter at this point with his limitations in terms of mobility. And he's 41 years old. And I don't see the run game getting better. And I don't know how you're just going to rebuild this offensive line successfully when that's what they've tried to do in consecutive off seasons. Are you just going to keep drafting offensive line at the top of every draft? And Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses are both free agents after this year, I believe. So what are you going to do with them? Are you going to re-sign them? I don't think you can be happy with the results that you've seen. I don't know. I just hardly even see the point of trying to save this offense because I think there's such a hard ceiling on them with where this line is at and with Aaron Rodgers is at. And the real nail in the coffin, Logan, is what you mentioned with the Robert Saleh firing, because I think that you ruined your culture. I think that you mortgaged everything to be completely desperate, to make things palatable to your fan base, to put the blame on anybody other than the quarterback who you put all of your stock into. And in doing so, you have put yourself in a position where you have no foundation left. I think Robert Saleh was a really good football coach. I think that the defense have gotten significantly worse, and I think that they have lost their heart and soul as an organization without him. And they really have no path to improvement. And you said it, dude. Woody Johnson is just, to me, an unserious person running this football team. I do not have faith in his decision-making. I do not have faith in Aaron Rodgers as a leader, as being the guy that this team would need him to be if they were to bounce back. The Bengals, I think, are in a really rough spot, but at the very least, they have Joe Burrow in the heart of his prime. They have Jamar Chase playing his best football ever. Their offense has never been better. They're averaging the most points per game of the Burrow era. Burrow is unequivocally having the best year of his career, 278 yards a game, 30 touchdowns, 5 picks, 107 passer rating. Those are Burrow's numbers this year. He's been incredible. Jamar is on pace to easily set career highs in receiving yardage and touchdowns. He's leading the league in both those categories. And yet you still stuck. So that is hugely disappointing. I mean, to call it a waste of those guys' seasons would be an understatement. It's a disgrace. And it's very reminiscent to me, and I tweeted this today, of like the 2014 to 2016 Saints, where you have this elite quarterback playing at an elite level, playing as well as ever. And opposite him, he has one of the absolute worst defenses in football, just a laughably bad defense. You can bounce back from that, though, right? And Joe Burrow obviously is significantly younger even than Breeze was at that stage. So, like, he has many prime years ahead of him. You can bounce back from that. It's a hole to dig yourself out of, but the Rodgers situation is more like maybe the Vikings the second year they had Brett Favre. I don't even know. Is there a comparison, right, where you've gone all in on a 40-year-old quarterback who just isn't playing up to that level and the team around him isn't good enough for you to be a serious playoff team? I think that they're in a much darker spot. Burrow keeps the window for this team to rebound more open, but they need major changes and they need to make some big decisions this offseason. And the first one is I am not paying T. Higgins if I'm the Cincinnati Bengals. I think T. Higgins is a damn good football player. I think both he and Jamar Chase have been really, really valuable to Joe Burrow's success. I think the fact that he's had such a great 1-2 punch at receiver, but I am just not paying two players at one position a premium price when I have an entire side of the ball that is in complete disarray. I'll draft a receiver early.
Exactly.
There's too much talent at the position for me to go out there and pay T. Higgins $25+ million when I already have Jamar.
Especially, and if you're going to do it in the first round, I think there's a ton of good options this year, man. If it's McMillan from U of A, if it's Luther Burden, right? If I know there's some other big dogs that are coming out this year. The wide receiver class is really good, so I wouldn't lose any sleep. But like you said, it's all about the cap allocation and how many holes you have on your football team. There's just, you can't afford it. It just doesn't make financial sense. The last thing I wanted to add on the Jets.
Yeah.
I can't confirm this, if this is true or not, but I did hear a story a week or two back that
from a little birdie
that Woody Johnson was reportedly taking some advice on the Jets from his son, Brick, who is I think Harvard. I think
these
he's
guys
a Harvard
name themselves
student.
after building materials. What the hell
Woody
is this?
and
Woody
Brick.
and Brick. By the way, all of which, as we talked about, are euphemisms for an erection.
Exactly. He's a pervert.
Woody Johnson.
He is a
and
pervert.
Brick Johnson. He is a massive pervert. He is a raging pervert.
And
I'm disgusted by the Jets organization.
He pushed it onto his next generation, man. Like, what are they going to name their? Is Brick going to name his son Dick?
Yeah, I mean that's the only logical step.
It's disgusting.
I don't know, Turgid Johnson. Oh, it's just disturbing. Here's the other major decision I think Cincinnati has to make this offseason, though. I think that they might have to clean house with the coaching staff, Logan.
Yeah,
I think
don't
that
think
it
it's
requires
a bad take.
that sort of major change.
It seems like the only team that the Bengals prepare for well is the Chiefs.
Kansas City Chiefs. Yeah. And listen, I've liked Lou Anarumo historically. I thought what he did in their Super Bowl run was super impressive defensively. This season has been an absolute disaster, though. And I understand they don't have good defensive talent, but when you're a bottom two defense in football, that almost always means that you're poorly coached, especially if you are a team that like is actively trying to win games and make a playoff push. Like, scheme is so impactful. Coaching is so impactful. He's not making the most out of his talent. Clearly, last year was terrible for them defensively as well. I think when you have a 2-year run that is this bad on that side of the ball, you've lost the credit that you had gained with your previous success. I think the last play of this game is a prime example of poor defensive coaching. Justin Fields comes onto the field to execute that 3rd and 4. How did you see Justin Fields ice the Steelers' last win? He went out there and he kept it off a zone read. So how in God's name is every single defensive player going to fully commit to the fake inside handoff to the running back? Nobody is prepared for Justin Fields to keep that ball. Like, that is just an embarrassment to me and a reflection of really how the Bengals defense has played all year. They've been horrible. So I don't know how you justify him after back-to-back years like this. And I don't know what Zach Taylor has done to keep his job. I think Zach Taylor is okay, but I would take a chance on a cultural overhaul, on maybe bringing in a more dynamic offensive or defensive mind. I think Joe Burrow, man, is so smart and so talented when you pair him with Jamar Chase that, like, you're going to get good offensive results. I don't think that Zach Taylor is the dude who deserves credit for that. And this has just been a horrible, horrible year organizationally in every way except for your star players doing their job. And I think that you have to hold the people around them accountable for that.
I agree. I think it's time. And like you said, man, this defense, well-coached defenses aren't this bad, man.
No.
I think it really reflects poorly on them. I wouldn't feel bad about it. Burrow and Chase are going to figure it out. You don't have to worry about the offense. You figure out a guy that can come in here, reestablish the culture. I think it's time, man. I think it's time.
I'd be giving Aaron Glenn a call. I'd be giving Robert Saleh a call. I do think I'd probably go defensive guys
I like
first.
Saleh makes sense to me, man. Like,
Good football coach.
may
Good
not
culture
be the
guy.
first year. You know what I mean? You may not reap the benefit because I think you need just talent. I think you need guys that know how to play. But I immediately think
Definitely.
he comes in here and gives you a scheme and an identity and something to buy into that they don't have right now. It's pretty pathetic.
It is pathetic. Shall we give some credit on the flip side, though, of this game, Logan, to your Pittsburgh Steelers, who put up 44 points? When was the last time that happened? During the Great War? Been a long time now, hasn't it?
Do 2018,
Let's
maybe?
see.
That would be
I'm
my
going to
guess.
go dive into those numbers. But how are you feeling about your Steelers after this one?
Well, I'm feeling pretty good. I wanted to see the Steelers win with a game script like this where we had to win a shootout, and they've answered the call a few times. This one, Russ balled out, 414 passing yards. Masterpiece from him. We put up 520 total yards of offense, 7.9 yards per play, and it's everybody. Najee, Jalen Warren, Pat Fryermuth, Cordero Patterson, Calvin Austin, everybody. We were spreading the rock out. I think he had 10 completions to 10 different receivers today. Russ balled out, and so I got to give him credit. I also got to give them credit for getting the ball to George Pickens. But that being said, George Pickens, you're one of my favorite Steelers offensive players I have ever had the privilege of watching. I think you're one of the 10 best receivers in football. And I say this with all sincerity and a lot of love in my heart for you and this team, George Pickens. Can you shut the fuck up? Like, please? George, I need you to screw your head on right. And I don't just mean this on the field. We'll get to the on the field stuff here in a minute. After the game, we lost to Cleveland. You came out and said that the Browns were still a sorry football team and basically giving us the Browns is the Browns speech that Juju Smith-Schuster gave us. Hey, George, we lost to Cleveland. So what does that say about us? We're a bad team too? Like, you just sound ignorant and stupid, and it sounds like spoiled grapes. There's no point in adding more fuel to the fire and giving Myles Garrett more ammo for his gun next time that we play them. Because he's already fired up. He doesn't need any more. It's because you're costing the football team. There were 3 stupid penalties today. 2 unsportsmanlike conducts and another taunting penalty. George Pickens right now leads the league in negative penalties. He's got 5 of them for 75 yards this season. He's got 3 unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. That's more than anybody else. He's got 2 taunting penalties. That's more than anybody else. And let me tell you something, George. Your actions and attitude on the football field are affecting the way that you are officiated. You see it on the first drive of this football game when Cam Taylor-Britt picks off Russell Wilson and takes it back to the house. That was a defensive pass interference penalty on Cam Taylor-Britt. You know why it wasn't called? Because you're a jackass, George, and you have a reputation with these zebras. The zebras aren't going to give you calls because they are looking at you. That was a flag that I think 90% of receivers get called. But you have a reputation, and it is negatively affecting the way that you are being officiated. The refs aren't going to look your way and give you the benefit of the doubt on defensive pass interferences and holds. More importantly, they are looking to hit your ass on unsportsmanlike penalties and taunting. George, you're one of the most talented receivers I've ever seen. We don't need you to run your mouth after you made a play. We saw the play. You know what the best players did? They shut the fuck up and they hand the ball back to the ref, and they don't get penalized and hurt their team after the fact. George, from here on out, I need Barry Sanders. I need Larry Fitzgerald. I need Kawhi Leonard. I need robot mode. I need you to make a big play and to zip it and hand the ball to the ref and go back to the line of scrimmage. The other guy that needs to get his act together is Peasy Jr. I don't know what the hell was going on there today, Peasy. That was embarrassing. 3 costly penalties against Cincinnati. He had 6 total. I think 2 of them got declined, luckily. But he had 6 total penalties today. 3 of them, it bit us in the ass. He had 3 of them against Washington. And right now, he leads the NFL in defensive pass interference penalties. On the year, Carson, he's got 14 penalties for 111 yards.
Sheesh.
It's embarrassing. It's inexcusable. Broderick Jones wasn't a problem today. Broderick Jones played a really good game, I thought. He's normally the culprit, but those 2 guys need to get their act together. And George, more importantly, because George, it's just inexcusable. It's after the play. It's stuff that has nothing to do with anything on the field, and it is incredibly frustrating when it is week after week, and it's because you want to run your fucking mouth. I'm fed up, Carson. I think George is, again, one of the most talented guys I've ever seen play the sport, but he is hurting the team right now. He is a detriment to the Steelers' offense, and like I said, it's just inexcusable. If you would shut your mouth after the play, none of this would be an issue. I want to see a different George Pickens after this. Final thing. I know I've been ranting here for a minute because they pissed me off today. The next guy that I want to point the finger at is Mike Tomlin. Mike, you're one of the best coaches in football history. I love you. I would never call for your head again because I appreciate what you do for this team, the culture you have established, how prepared you have these guys week in, week out. Pull George's fucking card in a team meeting. I would chew his ass up. And I wouldn't be afraid to do it. I would call him out in front of everybody, or I would call him to my office, and we would have a one-on-one conversation about him shutting his mouth. Like I said, it's because he's hurting the team. He is hurting the team right now, and I'm fed up.
Well said, dude. Hopefully George watches the show. I think George watches the show, and hopefully he takes it to heart. I'll go maybe a little more positive with the Steelers, though, because I do think the offense is looking better than ever, man. And listen, this Bengals defense is an absolute embarrassment, obviously an abomination, a catastrophic unit through and through. But Russell Wilson is impressing me, man. Our friend Theo Ash NFL, wonderful follow, wonderful man. Bit of an odd duck, but you get used to it, and he's a really smart guy. Tweeted out, Russ set his personal record for passing yards between the numbers in this game, 261 yards between the numbers. That's always been the biggest struggle for him, but especially in recent years, right? Making those throws over the middle of the field at his size, and he excelled there today. So again, this is a really bad defense, but the level that he's been playing at for 6 weeks now, I mean, he's averaging 8.7 yards per pass attempt, 10 touchdowns, 3 picks, 104 yards per game. Steelers offense has taken a level up from where they were with Fields, which was already a level up from last year. I understand the Browns loss was bad. And as we talked about, like, you have to understand the limitations that this offense does still have when you're putting them up next to the elite teams in the AFC. But I just continue to honestly feel better about this Steelers team. Not to say that I'm like really moved from where I was a couple weeks ago, but as some other teams around them have their flaws exposed, I don't think that's the case with the Steelers. I do legitimately think this is a team that can win a playoff game, and I think that that's a great success. So this game, to me, just with how they performed offensively, was encouraging in that regard. And they struggled defensively, but Cincinnati's an incredibly hard team to stop. And Russ had the pick six, but also the receiver fell down on that, so that's a weird play.
And like I said, I thought that should have been a defensive pass interference call. I can't believe they let that one slide. Russ deserves an immense amount of credit. He's played even better than I could have imagined. He's decisive. He's making quick decisions. He's accurate. He's on time. He's making defenses pay. Najee, I thought, looked a lot better in today's game, too.
Game.
Jalen Warren is still effective. It's a really balanced offensive attack. The guys that I want to give the most credit, though, are the offensive line. I think Zach Frazier has been phenomenal, one of the best rookie offensive linemen this year. Mason McCormick, who we drafted in the 5th round, has been playing great. Broderick Jones looked way better in this game, and especially those guys getting upfield and setting up blocks on underneath plays and impacting the game downfield. So I agree with you. I think the Steelers can win a playoff game this year. I haven't felt that way in a long time. I do feel differently this year. I think they can make it happen. I believe in the offense enough. And it starts with Russ. I can't sing Russ's praises enough. I think he's playing like a top 15 quarterback right now. I don't know exactly where I'd have him, but I think he's top half of the league right now. Russ has been playing really, really good football.
Over these 6 weeks, he's been in that range. I couldn't disagree with that. And I understand, like, people will look at the bottom line numbers from last year and the touchdown interception ratio and might say, oh, this isn't really that much of a level up. It is absolutely a big level up from where he was at last year. That was, first of all, a Sean Payton offense. I don't think Sean Payton gets enough credit for what he does with quarterbacks, but their offense got actively better the more they went away from Russell Wilson, the more they committed to just running the football, the more they limited what they were asking of him, the better the Broncos offense got. And that isn't the case, right? I mean, Russ is just letting it rip in this game, and he is delivering. So I think he's playing at a much higher level, and it's a level that I didn't anticipate seeing from either Steelers quarterback this year. And it just continues to move the needle for them in a positive direction. On that positive note, we're going to take a quick break for some words from DraftKings. After that, we've got a few more games to cover.
Getting some holiday shopping done this weekend? Pick up some touchdowns. They're on sale at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. What else would you expect from the #1 place to bet touchdowns?
DraftKings has doorbuster profit boots and bet one, get one promotions on all types of touchdown bets. Be sure to check the DraftKings Sportsbook app all weekend for flash deals that will have you dancing in the end zone.
Grab some TDs with DraftKings Sportsbook. They're on sale from Thanksgiving through Cyber Monday. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code NERDS to opt in. That's code NERDS only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Before we resume with the takes, Logan, I was just scrolling through our TikTok comments for a second. Do you have any defense for your hat brim? Everybody is coming for your hat brim.
Dude,
I mean, what do you have to say for yourself?
I've had this hat since I was like, I don't know, 16. Dude, this brim has been bent for 10 years almost now, man. I can't unbend the brim. I bent it when I was like 16. Like, I get it. It looks funky. I think it looks cool, man. And I don't really care what y'all think about how I wear my hat or how I wear my headphones. Or I think it's kind of weird that y'all are that concerned with another person's appearance. But I digress.
I just wanted to give you an opportunity to defend yourself.
I think it's kind of fresh, man. People can hate, but I like it.
You know, I'm not really somebody who's focused on a hat brim necessarily. It definitely has sort of a parabola shape to it, wouldn't you say? I mean, there's a very, very distinct bend there, but I like the hat. I do like the hat. And the fact that it makes you happy, Logan, is all that matters to me. You know what makes the people of Minnesota happy, Logan? Another win for the Vikings. They've won 5 straight. They're sitting at 10-2. Still, it feels not discussed enough for being a 10-2 football team. They beat the Cardinals with a game-winning drive led by the Sam Darnold. What did you take away from this one, Logan?
Dude, Sam Darnold continues to make me a believer. Now, I thought the first half was objectively bad from Sam. I didn't think Sam played a good game. I thought the second half was fantastic. And this is now 3 weeks of football where Sam Darnold has looked damn good. The drive where they end up getting a field goal in the red zone, that should have been a touchdown. That's not on Sam Darnold. He leads them down on that drive. They march down there. Darnold had a butterball past 2 defenders to Justin Jefferson. He had a big scramble. He had a dot to Jordan Addison that led him down there. And then he threw a dot to Aaron Jones in the end zone that Aaron Jones doesn't come up with. That should have been a touchdown. On the game-winning drive, finds Jefferson on a crucial 4th down, and then Jones redeems himself with that TD out in the flat. He moved the ball. He was great when he needed to be, and he did just enough. And that's the thing to me with Minnesota is they're so talented offensively that Darnold, I don't feel like, has to do a ton. The offensive system is great. I think Kevin O'Connell is brilliant. The skill position talent is superb. Justin Jefferson is the best wideout in the game. I really trust Jordan Addison. I think he's one of the better number 2s in football. TJ Hawkinson is an elite receiving tight end, and the defense is still a top 5 unit. They weren't dominant in the way that they've been dominant this entire year, but they were situationally excellent. When they had to button up in the red zone, they did that. When they had to force big turnovers, they did that. It's like this is a complete team top to bottom. And Sam Darnold's still the biggest variable, right? If he poops his pants in a playoff game, the Vikings are going to lose. It's really as simple as that.
Yeah.
But Darnold's played a damn good 3-4 week stretch right now. And I got to give him props. Like, he's been dependable. He did enough today. And this is against a good Cardinals team. I don't think the Cardinals are some pushover. It's been a down 2 weeks for them. And I think the final hump for Arizona is being consistent.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, that's just, it seems like the last thing that Arizona needs to do to be, into a different tier as a team. But this is a win against a good team. Darnold had to put some big drives together in the second half to win this one. And their kicker missed a field goal in this game too, right? That closed the margins. And it didn't matter. Darnold did enough in the second half, and I thought he played a really great second half, man. Darnold is continuing to make me a believer week after week, man.
Darnold is very solid. I feel like at this point in the year, we basically know who he is. He is not the MVP candidate that some people wanted to make him out to be over the first handful of games, nor is he the guy who he's been at his worst against the Jags, right? That was a really bad game. He had the stretch for a couple weeks, that game, the Colts game, where he's turning the ball over multiple times. That was concerning, and those games were always going to happen, but overall, this is a solid starting quarterback in the NFL today. And he has the physical traits. He has the arm. What I think it's underrated with Darnold is his pocket mobility and his overall athleticism. I mean, we have seen him rip off a number of pretty impressive scrambles throughout the year, right? He gives you 4 rushes for 22 yards in this game, and it's more than that. Again, it's moving around in the pocket. He really can move. So the key for Sam Darnold all year in terms of this team's playoff aspirations is going to be about limiting turnovers. It is going to be about not overtasking him, but also him not making the boneheaded mistake or two that is more likely to happen when you're asking him to do more, do too much, but also that he just can't afford to make regardless of the circumstances. But he's been playing at a good enough level all year that I've had the Vikings as a top 5 contender since I think the second edition of our power rankings, and they are my third team in the NFC. I definitely think Detroit and Philly are the top 2, but I also feel strongly that Minnesota is third. I know there's a lot of people who have the Packers above them. I still prefer the Vikings.
Like Green Bay. I think Minnesota's above them, but Jordan Love, man. Jordan Love.
You know, I love Jordan Love. I love Jordan Love. And I love LaFleur. I just think the Vikings are a more complete football team. I think that they are so talented on both sides. And really, I think they have a defensive edge. But offensively, Darnold was really good in the clutch moments. This was also a dominant Justin Jefferson game. I don't know what the hell happened with Justin Jefferson discourse where people were discussing if he had fallen off. Did you see this after last week?
That's so dumb. Did anybody watch the game?
I don't know.
He had 2 to 3 guys on him every snap. That's why
incredible.
Jordan Addison had 160 yards.
Couldn't agree more.
Can we use our brain?
Couldn't agree more. Legitimately a generational wide receiver talent, one of the best receiver talents we've ever seen. But he was awesome. And the defense made key stops, right? This wasn't their best defensive performance end-to-end, but they made key stops. I just think they're an elite football team. I think a lot of people were eager to call them pretenders because they didn't have these preseason expectations. And then they slipped a little bit, right? With a couple losses to good teams, but then a couple of unimpressive wins. But I think that they have remained in my top 5 deservedly, and they will going forward. On the flip side of this, for Arizona, I like them a lot. I think they're a very solid team. I really like their offense. I love watching Kyler. I love the balance between the pass game and the run game that they have. But I think you hit the nail on the head, dude. It's just consistency with this team. I think top to bottom, they are just inconsistent. Kyler, although I think he's probably been about the 10th best quarterback in football this year, is inconsistent. Game to game, drive to drive. He was inconsistent in this one. And, you know, both his picks are kind of fake. The second one is fake because it's 4th and 10, last play of the game. The one before that was 3rd and 7, and he did a 360 in the backfield, and he just kind of threw the ball out there. I mean, it was basically an arm punt. You would rather he not throw a pick there, but it wasn't a super costly one. But their offense also just didn't produce down the stretch like you needed them to. And I still don't trust their defense to get off the field. And their defense couldn't get off the field in this game. So they're very solid. They're not a team I think can really win a playoff game, you know, if they're drawing a good wild card team, which they will. I mean, they probably, if they do win the division, will be hosting a Minnesota, a Green Bay. I think those are much better football teams. But the Cardinals are solid, and they had this game in the palm of their hands. They honestly did. Minnesota had to kind of snatch it from them.
I think Arizona needs two things. I think they need a really impactful edge rusher, and I think they need a lead corner. And once they get that, I think this team's in a much better spot, at least defensively, because offensively, I tend to think that they're going to figure it out, and be more consistent, right? Kyler and Marvin Harrison playing together more. Trey McBride has been awesome this year. James Conner
was great today.
Has been great. The offensive line has looked better than I expected. So I think it's going to come together for Arizona. Real quick, I just want to do a would you rather real quick with some guys around Sam Darnold's area.
Yeah, let's do it.
Would you rather have Sam Darnold or Bo Nix?
Sam Darnold.
I agree. Would you rather have Sam Darnold or Brock Purdy?
Oh, man. This is an interesting one. I think that Darnold has more arm talent. I think that Purdy definitely has more of an ability to extend plays. I do think that he's more of a creator. I mean, I praise Darnold's mobility, but Purdy is more prone to running around in the backfield for 5 seconds and actually making something happen. These two guys are really close for me. I think I give the slight edge to Purdy. Maybe the tiebreaker is that we've seen it longer from him, although he's also obviously been in a great situation. But Darnold's also in a great situation. I think both these guys are very average starting quarterbacks.
I'd rather have Darnold, but it's just because I think Darnold's got a different kind of pop on his ball.
He absolutely does, and that's what holds me up. I mean, he is a significantly better arm talent.
Would you rather have Aaron Rodgers or Sam Darnold? I'd rather have Darnold.
I think I'd rather have Darnold right now.
Yeah,
I do. Rodgers, man, it's not just the lack of mobility. It feels like that affects everything, and it really affects his decision-making and his timing. He doesn't he feels this pressure.
I don't think he trusts himself in the way he used to.
Exactly. He doesn't trust anything. And so he's forcing these balls out within a second and a half of the snap, and sometimes it's just not there. I think I would rather have Darnold.
Well, also, I think the offense, we thought that Rodgers was going to be the elevator of this offense. I actually think he's kind of a handicap in terms of, he's throwing so many balls behind the line of scrimmage, checkdowns that just go nowhere, and you're just wasting plays of offense. A few more. Would you rather have Darnold or Tua?
This is another good one.
I'd rather have Darnold.
That's tough, dude.
I know.
It was so accurate. This is so close. Like, I almost want to call this a push. I feel like these guys are probably right next to each other in my rankings. I guess if it came down to a game in bad weather, tough circumstances, facing a good defense, I'd probably just rather have Darnold's physical tools. I feel pretty iffy about that, though, because I do think, like, within 2.5 seconds of the snap, Tua is really, really good, but he's just very limited physically. I think I'm actually going to give a very slight edge to Tua.
I respect that. I got two more.
Okay.
Would you rather have Darnold or Kirk Cousins?
Ooh. I'd rather have Darnold. I think that Kirk's lack of mobility we saw today can be very problematic.
Last guy, would you rather have Russell Wilson or Sam Darnold?
This is a tough one.
I'd rather have Russ.
I think I'd rather have Russ too.
Russ has been balling this year. And there's just a different level of, I feel like, poise and control I get with Russ where just, I mean, I can't overstate this, but going from Kenny to like, Russ understands the game so much better. He just feels like he's in so much more control than any of those guys. That touchdown, the one play that I would go back and watch if you want a good demonstration of is that throw to Calvin Austin. He throws that with such anticipation. He knows he's going to be there. He knows he's got one-on-one. He knows Austin is going to burn the guy. Like that, Russ has got a different kind of veteran feel that I feel like Darnold doesn't have, but I wouldn't count Darnold developing better feel from just playing more. He's still and that's the thing with Geno, right? I feel like Geno has developed that as he's gotten more and more playing time. Darnold, I still feel like can grow and get even better than he is right now because he's still relatively inexperienced, compared to some of these other guys that have been starting for a really long time. So I think Darnold can get even better, but he's rising. He's really rising for me this year, man.
He's very solid. It's crazy. There is such a strong middle tier of quarterbacks. Like all those guys who you named, personally for me, with the exception of Bo Nix, who I would have below all of them, but they are in a very similar range.
I'd rather
Listen,
have
Darnold's
Bo
a guy
Nix
you can
than
win multiple
I'd
playoff
rather
games
have
with.
Bo Nix than Rodgers right now, man. I don't even know if that's a hot
That's probably
take.
the closest. I mean, Rodgers, I would say, might be the lowest of the dudes outside of Bo. I would still have Rodgers over Bo, but Kirk is the other one where, like, it's awesome what he was doing early in the year, where he's just big nuts hanging in the pocket and throwing some dots, but he gives you 4 picks today. So let's talk about that game. What was your biggest takeaway from that Chargers-Falcons game? It's a 17-13 Chargers win. And as I said, Kirk O'Chains throws 4 interceptions.
Yeah, I thought this one said more about the Chargers, honestly.
Oh, that's nice.
Well, and what I mean by that is I just think it kind of shows you that the Chargers are a little bit fake. And
oh, so it's not nice.
It's not nice. I just mean that I think the Steelers, I had the Chargers above Pittsburgh. I think I got that wrong. I think I'd probably have Pittsburgh over LA, and they're close. I still think the Chargers are good, but the Chargers are like a Cardinals or Seahawks good. I don't think they're like a Steelers good. I think
they're between the two for me.
They're in that range, but I wouldn't pick. You know, I was getting high on LA, and they are down Dobbins, which sucks because Dobbins was so awesome this year, and I don't know if he's going to return this year, just with his injury history and what he's got going on. And I think they missed him today. I think you really felt his absence on the field with how they weren't able to run the football, but it surprised me how limited the Chargers were in the second half. I think they had 37 yards. I wrote it. I think they had 37 second half yards in this one, man, which is utterly ridiculous. Yeah, they had 38 yards. They got outgained by 163 yards. And the only reason they win this one is because of Kirk. Like, Kirk just gifts them this game. 4 picks, a pick 6. He said, hey, just take it. And right, one of them is at the end of this game. It's garbage time, right? But still.
Right.
And the Falcons, I still expect to win the NFC South somehow. It is such a poverty division, and the Falcons are probably going to sneak into the playoffs and host a playoff game. But yeah, to me, I think this said more about LA and the fact that I wouldn't pick them to win a playoff game. And I think I got a little bit. Them and the Texans, man, I think the Texans are in a different class. I think the Texans legitimately suck, which you've been on. But also a poverty division. The Colts are still alive, though. The Colts haven't died just yet. They're still alive. This one said a little bit more to the Chargers about me. And also it said that I just don't trust Kirk as much as I think I did earlier in the year, man. I think you see some big limitations from Kirk in this game.
I agree with that. And I think that kind of puts a hard ceiling on what Atlanta can be. And we've seen that now where they've come back to earth after the 6-3 start. And now they're 6-6 because this was really a Kirk disaster class. I mean, a couple of just disastrous moments. The pick 6 was horribly telegraphed. He was staring down the receiver for like 2 full seconds before he threw kind of a lame duck. The pick in the end zone where you waste a red zone possession, just like another lame duck moonball into triple coverage. And what's really concerning is we've seen some teams accelerate Kirk's clock, right? Where you're blitzing him and he just can't move around. And so there's pressure to get the ball out quickly. And like I said, hang in there in the pocket, even amidst that pressure. But he threw the first 2 picks in this game from totally clean pockets, both of them, if I'm not mistaken, against 4-man rushes. So I just can't excuse that decision-making. Like, that was really, really bad. And when Kirk was playing better football, I viewed Atlanta as a more legitimate division-winning caliber team. Never a team that I thought would win a playoff game, but not like just solely NFC South being a terrible division merchants. But now that's what I think they are. Now I think they're a painfully mediocre football team because he's been brutal in this 3-game slide. And you kind of look around and you're like, all right, what do they really do at a high level? It's a solid defense. They were actually able to get a pass rush in this game, but normally it's a weak pass rush. There's just not a ton to really like with Atlanta. I'm with you. I still think that they win this division. I think that they're the most complete football team. But when you consider that they gave Kirk $180 million and like this was supposed to be their all-in year, I think you're very disappointed. I know some people have been calling for Kirk's head and saying it's time to see Penix. Are you in that train?
Not right now. The thing with the backup quarterback is you always have to keep in mind you can't go back, right? If you make this decision, you're sticking with Michael Penix the rest of the way. You're at least 500 with Kirk, and I just don't know if Penix gives you a better chance to win football games right now. Like, look, don't get me wrong. I like Penix. Penix is one of my most pro-ready guys in the draft. I really liked him leading up to it. He's got good physicals, right? I think he's a little underrated athletically. He's really good throwing between zones against zone coverage. I like his timing and anticipation. I like his accuracy. The guy that I would comp Penix to is a better Tua. That's what I expect Penix to be, like slightly better Tua Tagovailoa, which is a good average starting quarterback. But the thing that you have to remember, rookie quarterbacks, there are growing pains, right? Penix might have a superhuman game, right? He might have a Will Levis kind of debut where he gives you 4 TDs and 280 yards. There's going to be a rookie game where he, gives you 3 picks and does something similar to this. Kirk, I still feel like, and again, I'm not a money pit guy. I don't like, doubling down on mistakes, but you also did give Kirk this contract.
Yeah.
You're not backing out. You already gave him the money. You're not backing out on Kirk right now. This isn't the decision. Now, after this year, maybe take inventory, maybe make up your mind, and you would have to eat some cap if that was your decision, right? But I don't think it's the right time right now, and I still think Kirk probably gives you a better chance to win football games moving forward.
I agree. I do think that Kirk gives you the better chance. And overall on the year, he's been okay. I mean, it's definitely been a stark contrast between how he's been at his best and how he's been at his worst. But I do think that he overall has been better than I would expect rookie Penix to be. And we can talk about the $180 million bottom line number, but also the Falcons have an out after next year. I completely expect them to use that out. I think this is a 2-year sort of transitional thing. Let's try to win now, and then we'll get Penix in there. I still didn't love them investing so much capital into the same position in one off season, but I think if they get off Kirk sooner and if Penix pans out, then that makes it more palatable to me. And that's not going to be this year, in my opinion. I think that maybe we see that midway through next season. But I think as long as they have Kirk without an option to get off of him, they're going to put him out there as their starter because he's the vet. I do think he's the more polished player at this point. But the arm and the lack of mobility are both concerning. On the LA side, I don't know if this game moved the needle as much for me in the negative direction as it did you. I kind of feel like this is just who the Chargers are, right? I mean, they have an elite quarterback, but the personnel around him is so limited that they've been a really mediocre offense this entire year. That was the case in this game. I mean, they only put up 10 points.
Quentin Johnson can't catch a cold, man.
No, he loves to drop the football, doesn't he? Although Ladd went crazy. Ladd had like 100 and something yards in the first half.
In the first half, bro.
He's good, man. He's good. But we can talk about how the Chargers are winning these games and Herbert's throwing for under 150 yards, and that's so great because it's a complete flip from what his reality had been through the first few years of his career where he's throwing for 300 a game and he's playing at this crazy level, but the defense is so bad, the coaching so bad, the run game is so bad that like they're still mediocre. It's great he has all that support around him, but also like as good as he is, this offense just doesn't have a lot of dynamism. So I still believe in like the same formula of can they go out there? Can they grind out games by being good defensively? I think they're good. I've said many times they are not the number one scoring defense level good that number would tell you, but I do think they're a good defense. I was impressed by their defense in this game. Like Kirk had some really bad moments, but also they made big plays defensively. So if they're good defensively and they have a great quarterback, I like that formula. Probably not to win a playoff game, but to get to the playoffs, to be competitive in a playoff game, yeah. If they could get the Houston Texans in a playoff game, then yes, to win a playoff game. Because the Texans are just flat out not good, bro. And the Texans haven't been good for a majority of this season. So I wouldn't put them in those conversations. I think they're good, but they're limited. And that's the reason that they don't have a super high ceiling. All right, Logan, give me a shout out of the day before we get out of here. Give me somebody who impressed you, somebody you want to show a little love to. Who is that?
Well, I thought about doing this for the Steelers since we kind of already got into that. I'll shout, let me scroll through in my head here. Who do I think had a good game today?
Bro doesn't even have a shout out.
I was going to shout out.
Want to spread
I was going to shout out Mr. Unlimited because I have been so skeptical this year. And
can't Can I give you two options who I was going to shout out, and you can make one of them your shout out if you want? Anthony Richardson or Bryce Young, the 2023 quarterbacks.
I mean, I'm thinking about doing a video on AR this week. I know AR's your boy, so I don't want to steal your thunder on that one.
What about Bryce? What about Bryce and his joyful smile, dude? Bryce's smile fills me with a joy I haven't known since I was a boy at Christmas.
I mean, that's a big win.
It's unbelievable.
Man. And
but doesn't he just make you happy?
Yeah.
Don't you just feel like he's like an anthropomorphic little mouse from a Disney movie come to life? He's such a little guy and he's got such a big smile.
Yeah,
and he's dancing and he's so happy.
I don't think you could. He's like the underdog. He is like he's the prototypical, like, you got to root for this guy.
He is, dude. I saw an edit of him set to some Taylor Swift song about being counted out and coming back. It's just poetic. It's beautiful what he's doing. I couldn't root for the guy more. I really couldn't.
You know what? I'll give a shout out to a couple other Steelers now that I'm thinking about it. I'll give a shout out to the unsung heroes of that defense, and that's Nick Herbig and that's Peyton Wilson.
Nick Herbig.
Dude, I mean, I've been singing their praises for about 2 years now. Herbig didn't really get a ton of burn until this year when Highsmith was injured, and he's a really good edge rusher. He's so quick. He can also play some snaps at inside linebacker. He's not bad in coverage, and Peyton Wilson is a beast. He's a really good coverage linebacker, and he comes up with the fumble that Herbig forced to recover. And also, I'll shout out Cam Hayward. I think Cam Hayward is one of the most underrated defensive players of this era. And I don't think numbers fully reflect like how impactful he is. The initial pressure that he creates from the interior, all the deflections at the line of scrimmage. One of the interceptions that we come away in this game is because of Cam Hayward. He bats a ball at the line of scrimmage. It gets tipped by T. Higgins, and then Dante Jackson picks it off. He makes that play happen. So TJ gets the shine, and rightfully so. I think he's the best defensive player on the planet. But although all three of those guys had awesome games today, and the defense got gashed. Our secondary was kind of embarrassing in this game. That's a different story. But I thought the front did a good job. And I don't know. Those guys always get overshadowed. So shout out Hayward, shout out Herbig, and shout out Peyton Wilson. Those guys have been playing great all year long.
Shout out to the fellas. I guess I'm going to give my two shout outs then, since you didn't like either one of them. I am going to shout out Bryce, not just because he has the energy of a joyful anthropomorphic mouse, but also because the guy really is playing much better football. And we talked last week about how one really good performance doesn't override all the concerns that we have about him, largely just the raw physical limitations that he has. But early in the year, when he was just playing horrible football, frankly, for a Panthers team that didn't look like they could win a game, his struggles were twofold. He was physically extremely limited as an arm talent, not somebody who was creating, getting out of the pocket, a guy who had to jump to make a pass just to see over his offensive line, right? All of that was a big problem, but also emotionally, psychologically, completely rattled, didn't look comfortable, didn't look confident doing anything. The decision-making was bad. The accuracy was bad. All of that has flipped on its head these past couple weeks, where now the accuracy has been much better and he just looks confident, man. I mean, the throw that he steps into to give the Panthers the lead at the end of regulation, he's just made several throws like that over the last couple weeks that he didn't make early in this year. And he's played the best 2 games of his pro career in back-to-back weeks. So I'm still not the highest on him, because I think those physical limitations are really hard to overcome if you want to be a franchise quarterback. But if you want to be a spot starter in this league, then I think that Bryce Young is showing you that he has the ability to do that because of how he has progressed mentally throughout this season. And that's good to see, because I think that that would be a success, because people were saying this dude was a worse pick than Jamarcus. He got a shorter leash than Jamarcus. And although I do have many concerns about him, I don't think that he is that. I do think that he is better than that. And then I'll give a shout out to Anthony Richardson. I thought he played another good game. I mean, I thought that it was an up and down experience, as it often is, but I thought that there were some really high highs. I thought that all of his touchdowns were impressive in this game. Makes a throw, facing a free rusher, has a nice rushing touchdown. And what I really loved about how the Colts approached the end of this game is that they went for 2 to win this game, because first of all, I like the balls. And second of all, particularly, I like the balls when you have Anthony Richardson and you're getting the ball on the 2-yard line. Like, to me, if you have an opportunity with a tank like that, who is right there with Josh Allen for the hardest quarterback to tackle in football, just with that sort of power. Put the ball in his hands, go out there, win the game. If you die on that one play, so be it, man. I want to put the ball in his hands in that situation and say, let's go with our best play and let's just trust him to physically overpower the defense. That's what they did, and that worked. And that got the Colts closer to potentially making the playoffs. They still got an uphill battle, but this was a big win they needed, and I liked how they went about getting it. So AR gets my shout out. And you know what? I'll give Shane Steichen a shout out by extension there.
I like the aggression too, and it keeps them alive. That's all you can ask for, man, is that the Colts are still out there fighting. And I don't know, man, with how the Texans are skidding, I wouldn't put it past Indianapolis, man. They're honestly, those teams are probably on even footing, man. I don't really think there's a really big gap there in terms of ability. And that's the thing that sticks out to me with Richardson, right? I always talk about how he makes the difficult things look really easy, and he just needs to button up the easy things, and then he's going to be a complete and total package. And that's easier said than done. But the one thing that doesn't change about Anthony Richardson is his effectiveness as a rusher. And that's what you banked on. And that's what is still very encouraging to me, is that was a big reason why the Colts were comfortable drafting him with that much inexperience in college, is that he did have the physical traits, and that has translated. He has got a huge arm. He throws a beautiful deep ball. And he is one of the biggest scrambling threats. And it's not like Lamar, right? It's not like Justin Fields. It's different.
It's like Josh Allen, Jalen
But
Hurts.
it is. And that is insanely valuable, because in the red zone, he's a problem. In third and short situations, he's a problem. In fourth and short, he's a problem. In 2-point conversions, right? Just quarterbacks don't have that kind of ability, and AR does. And he showcased it again today. He continues to impress me. I was relatively low, I think, on AR relative to consensus. And he's slowly, week by week, making me more and more of a believer, right? I had him in, I thought AR might have been in Will Levis territory or Bryce Young territory. He's clear of those, and very clear, very, very clear.
Hell yeah, brother. I am going to give a reverse shout out of the day, an anti shout out of the day to Azeez Al-Shaair, because somebody mentioned that hit in the chat. That was horrible. That was one of the dirtiest hits of the season. For anybody who didn't see it, just straight forearm to the head of a sliding Trevor Lawrence, who had clearly given himself up. Also, Al-Shaair launched himself at Lawrence.
He knocked him out. T-Law was out. T-Law was
horrible play.
Out, man.
T-Law leaves the game with a concussion. Terrible, terrible stuff. Legitimately the kind of thing that has the potential to be life-altering, a hit like that. Obviously, you hope not, right? And oftentimes one single concussion is not, but every concussion counts, man, and they compound, and that's just a scary and completely unnecessary event. In Al-Shaair had a dirty hit last week where a player had given himself up out of bounds, and he just came in and laid a super late hit on him. So fuck that guy, as you said. That sucks.
It's just inexcusable. And I hope
coping with the Texans' mediocrity.
Yeah. Trevor reportedly is back at home, and he said he's feeling better now, but just scary. Anytime you see a guy, and he gives you his arms are stiff and locked, you just hate seeing that. And
terrible.
Come on, man. We've come too far. Like, it's just, it's a different sport, right? In the 2000s, in the 90s, and the 80s. That might have fired
you on the ass, give you a medal for that.
Exactly. Not now, man. No. I mean, come on.
No, I completely agree. So on that bummer note, we're going to wrap this puppy up. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, the good news is there is so much more Nerd Sesh content. All of our full shows talking NFL and, of course, NBA are on our YouTube channel. We also did an NBA show that I want to shout out, ranking the top 10 peaks of this century with our friend Mars. That's over on the Mars Talk Sports channel. I tweeted the link to it, so you can go find that. It's really long. It's 3.5 hours, but it was also awesome. And I always love those sort of conversations. So we've got, again, all of our NFL and NBA stuff, full shows, and also our video essays on our channel. You can listen to the show across all audio platforms, and you can follow us across social media. We've got clips from the show, graphics from the show, but of course, we got loads of trivia content as well. And by the way, we did our first full trivia episode in a while this past week, a little bit of a Thanksgiving special. If you haven't watched that, you can go and check that out. But we had some really fun questions from that one that are also going up on our TikTok. So stay tuned in for all of that. I feel myself losing my voice. So I'm going to try to wrap this up quickly. Check out our merch if you want. That's at breakingt.com. The link to that is at the link tree in our social media bios, and you can join our Discord. The link to that is also in our link tree. So with that, as always, appreciate all you guys who tuned in, join us for this Sunday evening. I've been Carson Brabber.
I have been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.